From Washington, D.C., this is the Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. Assalamu alaikum. I'm Hena Zuberi. First, the headlines. Biden calls Putin war criminal as U.S. seeks a UN vote to kick Russia out of Human Rights Council. 3 GOP senators vote to confirm Ketanji Brown Jackson. Families of 9/11 victims visit Kabul, demand U.S. return funds. Hungary's nationalist pro-Putin PM ORBAN wins 4th term. Students at Georgetown University host Israeli Apartheid Week. Libyan's restorers revive old copies of Quran for Ramadan. And our top story tonight. On Monday, the United States announced it will seek a vote in the UN General Assembly to expel Russia from the Human Rights Council. A member state can be removed from the council following a 2/3 majority vote in the General Assembly. An expulsion can be sought if a state is found to have engaged in a pattern of gross and systemic abuses. The bodies of at least 410 civilians were recovered in the city of Bucha on Sunday, according to Ukraine's prosecutor general. Russia has denied that its troops killed civilians while withdrawing from towns near Kiev. Ukraine is calling for an investigation into war crimes committed by Russian troops.
You may remember I got criticized for calling Putin a war criminal. Well, the truth of the matter is so what happened to Bucha. This warrants him, he is a war criminal. But we have to gather the information. We have to continue to provide Ukraine with the weapons they need to continue the fight. And we have to gather all the detail so this can be have a war crime trial. This guy is brutal. And what's happening in Bucha is outrageous. And everyone's seen it.
On Thursday, U.S. Republicans and Democratic senators reportedly reached a deal on COVID-19 aid, slashing proposed funding to combat the pandemic globally. Public health advocates condemned the decision as short-sighted and potentially catastrophic for developing nations. Congresswoman Pramila Jayapala warned that cutting funding means people around the world will die. Robert Weissman, president of the nonprofit consumer advocacy organization Public Citizen, said such a move would be unconscionable, cruel, and stupid. He added that it would consign poorer countries to more death and disease and invite a resurgence of the pandemic in the United States. Senator Mitt Romney, a Utah Republican who led GOP negotiations, said senators reached an agreement in principle on coronavirus funding. This comes weeks after the Democratic leadership removed pandemic funding from an omnibus spending package due to dispute over how to finance the aid. On Sunday, Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban was elected to a 4th term in office in an election overshadowed by Russia's war in neighboring Ukraine. Orban's ruling Fidesz party extended its parliamentary majority by 2 seats in the general election. Voter turnout was at near record levels, but an international mission of election observers said that the vote was marred by the absence of a level playing field. Observers also said that the media landscape was slanted towards Fidesz and cited a lack of transparency in campaign financing. Orban staying in power threatens to erode democracy further in Hungary, analysts said on Monday. They added that Orban needs to tread a careful path with Brussels to secure much-needed European Union funds. On Monday, the World Bank labeled Lebanon's economic crisis as amongst the worst in the world. Siroj Kumar Jha, World Bank Director for the Middle East Department, said that the Lebanese crisis is amongst the 3 worst crises in the world. He spoke during a meeting in the capital Beirut with officials from Lebanon, the United Nations, and the European Union. Kumar said there's a need to achieve stability at the macroeconomic level. He warned the economic situation in Lebanon is dire, with the economy contracting 60% by the end of 2021. Lebanon has been grappling with a severe economic crisis since late 2019. It has led to a massive currency depreciation and fuel and medical shortages. Hundreds of women working in the Iranian film industry have criticized systematic violence against them and called for holding perpetrators and enablers accountable. More than 200 women condemned sexual violence and harassment, which they have claimed has become endemic in Iranian cinema. Amongst the signatories of the statement released Friday are some of the most well-known Iranian actresses locally and internationally. There is no mechanism to prevent powerful individuals from committing violence, they wrote. Inflicting violence against women in workspaces has been normalized with no serious ramifications for aggressors, they wrote. Actresses Taraneh Ali Dosti, Hadiya Tehrani, Niki Karimi, and Puran Darakhshande, household names in Iranian cinema, are amongst the signatories. Jordan's Prince Hamzah bin Hussein, the outspoken half-brother of Jordan's king, has relinquished his royal title. In doing so, Hussein said that his convictions are at odds with the approaches, policies, and methods of our institutions. He made the announcement on his official Twitter account on Sunday. The junior royal was placed under house arrest last April in an ongoing palace feud. Although he stopped short of criticizing King Abdullah II and Jordan's ruling elite, his tone signaled the rift between them had not been mended. The royal Hashemite court did not immediately comment. Abdullah and Hamzah are sons of King Hussein, who ruled Jordan for nearly half a century before his death in 1999. King Abdullah has appointed Hamzah crown prince upon his succession, but stripped him of the title in 2004. With the arrival of Ramadan, a group of Libyan volunteers is working around the clock to restore old or damaged copies of the Quran. Khalid al-Dribi is a renowned Libyan restorer of Islamic's holy book. He's among those volunteers at a workshop in the capital Tripoli, catering to the influx of customers during Ramadan. For Muslims, Ramadan is a month of spirituality during which daily dawn to dusk fasting is accompanied by prayer and acts of charity. The latter often translates into a surge in purchases of copies of the Quran for donation. On Monday, India's New Delhi High Court allowed Washington Post journalist Rana AYYUB to travel abroad under certain conditions. AYYUB was barred from leaving the country last week to speak at events about press freedom. AYYUB, an outspoken critic of Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's anti-Muslim rhetoric and policies, has faced relentless harassment and online abuse for years. That includes rape and death threats by Hindu right-wing groups and Modi's online troll armies, according to an investigation by The Wire. That report also found that AYYUB is amongst a number of journalists, including many women, to be targeted by a sophisticated online disinformation campaign. The International Press Institute, a global network of editors, media executives, and leading journalists, has condemned the Indian government's continued harassment of AYYUB. Indian ranking of media freedom has sunk to 142nd in the world, according to Reporters Without Borders. It's lower than Burma and Afghanistan. Families of those killed in 9/11/2001 attacks have asked the White House to help end the mass starvation crisis in Afghanistan. They urged the U.S. government to release Afghanistan's foreign reserves, which the U.S. government has frozen since last August, when the Taliban took over the country. Terry Rockefeller, whose sister died in the World Trade Center on September 11th, said, "It's not only a moral imperative, but also a national security interest. The move will prevent Afghanistan from sliding into total collapse," she said. Rockefeller is a member of the September 11th Families for Peaceful Tomorrows. 3 family members of September 11 victims said these billions belong to the Afghan people. U.S. President Joe Biden has rejected the Taliban's demand to release the funds and seeks to divide it amongst September 11th families. Bringing more news stories after the break. Stay tuned, and we'll be right back after these messages.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour. If if we could find a way to get inside each other's minds. Walk a mile in my shoes, walk a mile in my shoes. Well, before you abuse, criticize and accuse, walk a mile in my shoes.
There are 16 million children struggling with hunger in America. That's 1 in 5 daughters, sons, neighbors, and classmates who don't know where their next meal is coming from. Yet billions of pounds of good food go to waste every year. It's time we do something about it. Feeding America is a nationwide network of food banks that helps provide meals to millions of kids and families in need. Visit feedingamerica.org to help them feed even more. Together, we can solve hunger. Together, we're feeding America.
Mr. Speaker, if I decide to wear a turban, or you decide to wear a cross, or he decides to wear a kippah or a skull cap, or she decides to wear a hijab or a burqa, does that mean that it is open season for right honourable members of this House to make derogatory and divisive remarks about our appearance? For those of us who from a young age have had to endure and face up to being called names such as Towelhead or Taliban, or coming from Bongo land, we can appreciate full well the hurt and pain felt by already vulnerable Muslim women when they are described as looking like bank robbers and letterboxes. So rather than hide behind sham and whitewash investigations, when will the Prime Minister finally apologise for his derogatory and racist remarks? Racist remarks, Mr. Speaker, which have led to a spike in hate crime. And given the increasing prevalence of such incidents within his party, when will the Prime Minister finally order an inquiry into Islamophobia within the Conservative Party, something which he and his Chancellor promised on national television?
Despite the development of a COVID-19 vaccine, millions around the world will not have access. We need a vaccine that's free and available to everyone, everywhere. It's time for a people's vaccine.
Dad, they took over my bedroom. Come on, come on. Okay, Dad. 1, 2, 3. Dad! You saved me. Dad?
Are you okay?
I'm fine, dear.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need at aarp.org/caregiving.
Welcome back. In domestic news today, we'll start with a story of an American chaplain. Omar Bajwa was a graduate student and an aspiring journalist before he became Yale University's first full-time Muslim chaplain. The September 11, 2001 attacks became the catalyst that changed the trajectory of his career. Then Bajwa was involved with Cornell University's Muslim Student Association. High schools, public libraries, radio stations, and college campuses were calling the association for panels on Islam and understanding 9/11, he said. Bajwa calls it a pivotal moment that he saw as an opportunity for teaching and interfaith engagement. Today, Bajwa is the director of Muslim Life at Yale, where he has been since 2008. He's also co-editor of the book Mantle of Mercy, Islamic Chaplaincy in North America, a collection of 30 First People account by Muslim chaplain. Georgetown University Students for Justice in Palestine held Apartheid Week March 14th to 18th, which featured events focusing on advocacy for the people of Palestine. A Palestinian gala featured music, food, art, dabka, which is a Palestinian dance style, and other performances. The week also included a tile painting event and panel discussion. Israel has systematically discriminated against Palestinians under its rule in occupied Palestinian territories, according to Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch. Both have declared Israel an apartheid state. Israel has also forcibly displaced Palestinians through coercive measures, including razing homes, the human rights group's report said. On Monday, Republican Senators Lisa Murkowski and Mitt Romney said they will vote to confirm President Joe Biden's Supreme Court nominee, Ketanji Brown Jackson, CNN reports. They joined Senator Susan Collins, who has already declared her support for the nominee. Murkowski cited Jackson's qualifications, judicial independence, her demeanor and temperament, and the perspective she would bring to the court. Jackson would replace retiring Justice Stephen Breyer. Romney tweeted Jackson is a well-qualified jurist and a person of honor. He added he doesn't expect to agree with every decision Jackson might make on the court. A majority of Senate Republicans are expected to vote against Jackson. Yet she has deepened her support amongst the GOP. On Monday, the U.S. House Rules Committee voted recommending criminal charges against two former White House aides to former President Donald Trump. They could face charges for refusing to testify in the House investigation of the January 6, 2021 attack on the U.S. Capitol. The full House is set to vote on whether to pursue contempt charges against former trade advisor Peter Navarro and social media guru Dan Scavino. If a majority is in favor, it would make them the third and fourth former Trump advisors recommended for charges in connection with the January 6th investigation. Coming up next after the break is our in-depth analysis segment on Yemen. So stay tuned and we'll be right back after these messages.
Assalamu alaikum. This is Imam Malik Mujahid in Chicago. Just like you, I was moved by that Allahu Akbar lady. She stood her ground, fearful of none, for her hijab and for her education. Sisters and brothers, Indian Muslims are facing a genocide. India does not care for Muslim protesting, but it does care for the world opinion. Therefore, we must push the United Nations. The UN has a responsibility to protect. They must prevent genocide. Please sign this UN petition now. Get others to sign. It will help. Trust me, it will help. We need 1 million signatures, brothers and sisters. Please sign now.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour. If we could find a way to get inside each other's minds. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes. Well, before you abuse, criticize and accuse. Walk a mile in my shoes.
Mr. Speaker, if I decide to wear a turban, or you decide to wear a cross, or he decides to wear a kippah or a skull cap, or she decides to wear a hijab or a burqa, does that mean that it is open season for right honourable members of this House to make derogatory and divisive remarks about our appearance? For those of us who from a young age have had to endure and face up to being called names such as Towelhead or Taliban, or coming from Bongo land, we can appreciate full well the hurt and pain felt by already vulnerable Muslim women when they are described as looking like bank robbers and letterboxes. Than hide behind sham and whitewash investigations, when will the Prime Minister finally apologise for his derogatory and racist remarks? racist remarks, Mr. Speaker, which have led to a spike in hate crime. And given the increasing prevalence of such incidents within his party, when will the Prime Minister finally order an inquiry into Islamophobia within the Conservative Party, something which he and his Chancellor promised on national television?
Despite the development of a COVID-19 vaccine, millions around the world will not have access. We need a vaccine that's free and available to everyone, everywhere. It's time for a people's vaccine.
I am what hunger looks like in America. I am an 8-year-old girl who's not excited for the last day of school.
Because this may be the last time I'll have lunch. Till September.
I am a single father of 2 who works 3 part-time jobs, and that's still not enough to put food on the table. I was created by artificial intelligence from faces of the 1 in 8 Americans who struggle with hunger.
Feeding America, 200 food banks strong.
Welcome back. To discuss the truce in Yemen, let's go to Imam Abdul Malik Mujahid. Over to you, Imam Mujahid.
Thank you, Hena. As the world rightfully focuses on Ukraine, media, and the world powers, there are other disasters around the world created by war continuously are being forgotten. One such place is Yemen. There is 7-year worth of civil war has devastated society, and United Nations consider one of the most disastrous location at this moment. And they have difficulty raising money. They are looking for $4.3 billion to help people, feed them, and take care of people who are in the Yemen civil war zones. They were able to raise only 1/4 of it, $1.3 billion. We're glad to have with us Hassan El-TAYYAB, who is Legislative Director for Middle East Policy at Friends Committee on National Legislation. Welcome to Muslim Network TV. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Share with us the good news coming from Yemen that there is a truce. Tell us what are the warring parties and if all of them have agreed to this truce.
Well, the war in Yemen has dragged on for 7 years. We are now entering the 8th year of the war as of March 25th, and the UN has called this the world's worst humanitarian crisis on the planet. There are currently over 16 million people living on the edge of starvation. There are 400,000 children suffering from severe acute malnutrition who need urgent care. So the basic situation is that the Saudi-led coalition is trying to reinstate President Hadi, who is now based in Riyadh, to power. The Houthis have taken over Sana'a and now govern 80% of the population. And there's also the Southern Transitional Council, which is allied with the United Arab Emirates, and they've been fighting for control of this country for a long time. Many say that the Saudis and the Saudi-led coalition have essentially lost the war. But nonetheless, it's really good news that there has been a Ramadan truce agreed to. The basic structure of this truce would be that the Saudi-led coalition would end its blockade. That means allowing fuel ships, allowing food, fuel, medicine into the ports of Hodeidah and Salif Port, open up Sana'a Airport to commercial traffic, and also stop the airstrikes. And the Houthis would also end their hostilities in the country and stop their cross-border attacks. Now, I think this is great news whenever there is an end to violence, an end to hostilities. But we have to watch and see what actually happens. There have been many truces and many ceasefire arrangements that have been agreed to that have broken down. So what we're watching for very closely is, do fuel ships actually get allowed in? So far, only 1 ship has been allowed in. That's not enough for a population of 30 million people. We need 544,000 metric tons of fuel into the ports of Hodeidah and Salif, to sustain Yemen's needs. We also need to see Sana'a Airport actually open. We haven't seen that just yet. And, crossing fingers and toes, but we have to make sure that the airstrikes actually stop. So we are, watching this closely, obviously hopeful. I'm cautiously optimistic that this is different, but again, we have to wait and see.
So Houthis and Saudis together have signed this peace treaty or truce?
Yes, they came together and they agreed to a basic framework. It was facilitated by the UN envoy to Yemen, so the UN is involved in this process. And I think that this is, like I said earlier, good news and something that we should try to work to support and build on, because as so many people have said before me, Yemen can't wait. This is the world's worst humanitarian crisis. The UN has said, as a result of the war in Ukraine and Yemen, I will remind guests if they didn't already know, Yemen imports 28% of its wheat supply from the Ukraine and 8% of its wheat from Russia. So the UN is predicting that the famine numbers could increase fivefold by the end of 2022. So this truce is a desperately needed step so we can get Yemen's humanitarian crisis under control.
So why United Nations was unable to raise? I mean, they were looking for $4.3 billion and we got commitment of only $1.3 billion. Why so?
Great question. There are a lot of crises on the planet right now. The war in Ukraine is just another one, but there's also the situation in Afghanistan, the situation in Ethiopia. There is hunger all over the world, and unfortunately, governments around the world have prioritized war and militarism. The United States, is spending close to $1 trillion on defense in this coming year, and it's been spending $700 billion plus annually for quite some time. So, the idea that we just can't afford to support the humanitarian needs of countries that we are bombing, I think is utterly ridiculous. Saudi needs to pay its fair share. The UAE needs to pay its fair share, but also the United States. If we are supporting militarily the Saudi-led coalition, the Biden administration came in and made some promises at the beginning of their term in office. But we now know that maintenance and spare parts are ongoing, and these are critical for the daily operation of these Saudi warplanes. So they can't tell me that, we can't prioritize humanitarian assistance, because we are certainly prioritizing the military support of the Saudi-led coalition, which totals in the billions of dollars. And, everybody needs to pay their fair share with regards to solving this crisis.
While discussing this, so far you have mentioned Saudi multiple times, but you have not even mentioned once, which media is mentioning, that Houthis are Iran surrogates, and it's Iran and Saudi Arabia which are having their proxy fight there. So what is your analysis on that?
Yeah, so let me be clear. I'm a US citizen. I pay taxpayer dollars in the United States. So a lot of the advocacy I do is focused on trying to end my government's complicity. But there is no doubt there are atrocities being committed by Ansar Allah, aka the Houthis. Iran is backing the Houthis, and that needs to stop too. But I would argue, as a US citizen working for a nonprofit here, I have limited leverage over that situation. And I hope that we can work diplomatically to end the crisis, and that requires all the warring parties to stop sending weapons to the folks on the ground. That includes Iran, that includes UAE, that includes Saudi, but also includes the Western countries that are backing the Saudi-led coalition. So, we don't get to peace by ending one side of it. We got to end all of it. But I think everybody that is complicit needs to own their side of the street. And that's what I'm trying to do here with the US government.
Very good. Do you think this truce, which is, I'm assuming, is for a couple of months, do you think there is a possibility of its extension, or they're going to resume hostilities?
That's a great question. It really depends. I think, we can certainly do things on our side here in the United States to pressure our lawmakers to continue to hold Saudi and the UAE to account. And obviously, we need to support humanitarian efforts and support the UN diplomacy effort. But, I think it's really up to the parties on the ground, if they continue the fighting. But what I'm trying to do to make sure that Saudi Arabia and the UAE stay in line is support Reps DeFazio and Jayapal in their pursuit of a new Yemen war powers resolution. And this bill would end the ongoing complicity that the United States is providing the ongoing logistical support, maintenance, and spare parts. They are planning on introducing this bill, but I think if the Biden administration sees that, that there's a limited runway to even continue hostilities by the Saudi-led coalition because Congress would shut off that support, I think that's going to really help, incentivize them reaching a deal, making a lasting peace, and finally stopping the aerial assault on this country.
Do you think that, for 7 years it is going on, and you mentioned there have been many truces and which have been broken. Do you think finally parties are realizing that nobody is going to have their way, so let's just stop where they are?
So we can't give up on peace. We can't give up on Yemen. The people of Yemen, they need our help. They need, they don't need to be saved, but they need humanitarian assistance because there's this artificial restriction of goods and services, and through their ports of entry. And, we have to do everything we can to make sure that this truce holds, because we are in some dark times, obviously, with, the war in Ukraine and the lack of wheat being shipped around the world, including the Middle East. And Yemen can't wait any longer for this blockade to be lifted. We have to act now.
Well, thank you so much, Hassan El-Tayyab, for your time.
I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me and bringing attention to an issue that's so near and dear to my heart. I would urge everybody to go to fcnl.org to kind of learn more about how we're approaching the situation and our advocacy efforts. I think, there are a lot of crises in the world. This is something that we can do something about. This is one of those issues that, that the United States in particular has a lot of leverage to end the humanitarian suffering, especially by trying to open up these ports of entry so people can leave Sana'a Airport to get medical treatment abroad, and that all the ports are open to fuel and commodities.
Thank you so much. Well said.
Thank you.
Back to you, Hena.
Thank you so much, Imam Mujahid. That's all from our Washington studios tonight. Thank you for tuning in. You can find previous episodes and more on our YouTube or Facebook. For more content, keep watching Muslim Network TV or visit muslimnetwork.tv. Assalamu alaikum and good night.